3 is completely counterintuitive. Identify all the reasons you can think of for not forgiving them. All the expectations you had of them that they did not meet. Why? Because this is not something that you do for some trivial reason. It's something you do because your life depends on it. Because who you want to be in the world is a choice that you should be entitled to make, not someone else. No one should be able to make that choice for you. That's really deep and fundamental. Step 5. Choose 5. Step 5 is in 2 parts, 5A and 5B. Okay. This is 4. 4A and 4B. 4A. Choose to release yourself from every one of those reasons. To just say, it may be a good reason, but I choose not to have it run my life. Or, part B, identify what it's going to cost you to hold on to it. And this is the place where it hurts. Because what it's going to cost you to hold on to the pain that someone else caused you is going to cost you your life, your future. You are dedicating a part of your life energy to somebody who doesn't deserve it, to something that's over. So what we have to then do is, what forgiveness is really, is reclaiming for yourself who you actually are. Not letting that be a consequence of what someone has done to you. This is not an easy thing to do. It's a very deep and powerful thing, but it gives you a kind of freedom. And this leads you in the direction of then trying to create the final step, which is to create a ritual, to design and execute a ritual that says, this is actually over for me. To do something. And the reason for that is so that you don't kid yourself about the forgiveness part. So we talk about forgiveness as something you should do, but really it's an individual choice that each of us has to make for ourselves. And in order to do this, we have to actually see that there are good, solid reasons for not forgiving them for what they did to us. And that every single one of those reasons compromises our life. Our energy gets sucked into that conflict and just held there. And we're no longer as available for all the other things in our life. We don't have, but some part of our energy is just stuck there.
There's so much in all of that. Apart from anything else, Mike, you've got your sermon for the next 5 Sundays.
But we'll still take an offering.
No. There was something earlier on in that passage about unconditional open-heartedness, which sounded to me to be awfully close to what would be understood in the Christian tradition as grace.
Yes.
As God's unconditional love for us all, as represented in Jesus Christ.
Absolutely.
What's your take on on faith these days and on faith expression through various religions and the way in which that interacts with the descriptions you've given us about how, in apparently a common sense way, we might learn to live?
There's a wonderful little statement from Carl Jung. Have you heard of Carl Jung, who is a colleague of Sigmund Freud's? He said that religion oftentimes is a defense against the religious experience, which is interesting. Because, in other words, you can have the organized system, the dogma, the beliefs, the principles of faith, and those can actually be used in some cases to prevent you from being able to see the other person as someone who is, sort of a manifestation of the same truth as you are. I mentioned this the other day, that Gandhi said, if you can't see God in the person who's right in front of you, you might as well stop looking. So I think that's kind of basically true. What all religions search for is, I think, this underlying truth about our interconnectedness. We recognize each other. We are capable of loving each other. We're capable of working together, and we're also capable of doing a lot of damage to each other. And so what the highest form, I think, of forgiveness is, the highest form of reconciliation, is sort of seeing that the differences between us, diversity, if you want to think of it that way, gender diversity, racial diversity, religious diversity, all different forms of diversity are a gift to us that show us our own deeper nature. Because we are more than just this particular congregation and other types of other congregations within the same church and other churches even within the same tradition and other religions. We basically share something that we can think of as spiritual in nature, which can be thought of as simply a quality of life, energy. We can recognize it in animals. We can see it in each other. And what's important for us to do is to find ways of more fully and completely becoming ourselves. And I think that that's a kind of deep religious task. I don't know.
No, that's lovely, and I'm very conscious that the hand of the clock moves to 11 o'clock, and I would like to formally conclude, and then perhaps give 5 or 10 minutes for those who'd like to stay and ask a few questions. But
Sure.
We should bring this to a formal conclusion, because this is when we say. But I want to leave you with something, folks, to take away, because I think a morning like this deserves to have something which you can take with, if not with confidence, at least with knowledge, to difficult situations which you are experiencing just now. So what I'm going to do is to read you some questions. We call them Ken Cloke questions in the trade. I find myself sitting in mediations asking questions and thinking, that's a Ken Cloke question. That's okay. And I only have the courage to do it because I have had the benefit of working with, being with, listening to and reading about Ken and from Ken. So here are a few questions. Think about a current situation in your lives which isn't just as it should be, which is causing you discomfort and about which you would like to do something, particularly having heard from Ken. These are the questions, for ourselves as well as for other people. What is the crossroads at which you are standing at this moment in your life or in this conflict? What is preventing you from moving forward? What have you done or not done that has contributed to or sustained this conflict? What price, remember you talked about energy consumption, Ken, what price are you paying for this conflict? How long do you intend to continue paying it? Is there anything in this conflict you wish you had done better? And if the answer to that is nothing, you haven't been listening to Ken for the last hour and a half. Is there anything for which you would like to apologise? Same comment. What kind of relationship would you like to have with each other? What's stopping you from having it? How could you help or support each other in creating it? What's the one thing that you would like to be acknowledged? What's the one thing for which you would like to acknowledge another person? Because it works both ways, because they're like you. If this was the last conversation you're ever going to have with them, and you're never to see each other again, what's the last thing you want to say to each other? I actually once asked that question of a son about his father. In a very difficult matter, family matter, business matter, and all I can tell you was the second word was off. So one has got to have a sense of humour about these things as well. But seriously, what's the last thing you want to say to each other? On what note would you like to end? And lovely, beautiful last question. What does your heart tell you to do? Speak directly to the other person from your heart right now, or at least in the course of the next few hours or days, if you possibly can, using some of the wonderful wisdom that we've heard from this wonderful man, whose humility and graciousness, along with his generosity and openness of heart, you've been privileged to experience this morning. We've all been privileged to experience this morning. As ever, once again, Ken, thank you so much for it. And do feel free to leave now if you wish, but are you okay for a few minutes for a few questions? I know you want to get down time, but a few minutes. Questions, comments?
There are a number of programs right now that are working with kids in schools. I've developed a little kind of way of working with very young children, which just consists, and the idea is to train the parents, the teachers, the children, and anybody else in the kid's life to use the same set of questions. 1, what happened? 2, how did it feel? 3, what do you want? 4, why is that important to you? 5, what are you doing in order to get it? 6, is that working? 7, what do you think you might do instead? 8, what kind of relationship would you like to have with each other going forward? 9, what are you prepared to do in order to create that relationship? 10, is there anything else that you would like to say to each other before we end? Right? So just 10 simple questions, and every kid can understand them, and then they use them in their various conflicts, and it's very, very powerful. Dialogues between kids also are quite wonderful. We've been talking a little bit about mediation, but dialogue also is a very, very powerful process, and I use it a great deal. And I've led some dialogues with kids, and they're amazing to hear the kinds of things that come out of their mouths, the wisdom, and the completely different takes on things that come out of their mouths. But when they talk, for example, I've worked in classrooms where kids talk about bullying, what it feels like to be bullied by another kid. Have you ever been bullied, right? Everybody has been bullied on some level. What did it feel like? What would you have wanted to say to the person who was bullying you that you didn't ever have a chance to say? Would you like to say that right now, right? So how many of you stood up and supported somebody who felt bullied? Why not? What was stopping you? Things like this, so that what you begin to then create is a sense of ownership of the problem, and that's really important. So I'm glad that you mentioned that, and it's this is where we have to really start for the next generation to grow up with these skills and be able to practice them.
2 things occurred to me, Carmen, about that. One is, it would be easy to assume that children, we should treat them in a different way, or a simplified way. What Ken has just described is the fact that children are very open to this and understand this, often at an intuitive level, and therefore this kind of work can be done. The second thing which is occurring to me as I listen to you, Ken, is the simplicity about all of this is that these 10 questions are straightforward questions.
Yeah.
We can all learn to use them, but we have to discipline ourselves, maybe even write them down, and use them at times when our default will be to say, stop this, stop that, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that, and just create the very thing that we know now we shouldn't be creating. And it's that sense of discipline and habit which Ken exemplifies, but it's actually available to us all.
The last one we forgive, of course, is ourselves. And self-forgiveness is a very different task. There are two pieces of this. The first piece I want to take on, which is the most difficult problem, which is where something incredibly traumatic has happened to you. What I think of as catastrophic loss. What do you do then? What's the form of forgiveness? And I think that the answer is that if you try to go through this ordinary process, it's not really going to work for them. But there's another process that does work, and just very simply, the bottom line of it is this. Instead of being asked to kind of overcome what has happened to you, what you need to do instead is to turn it in the direction of prevention by dedicating some part of your life to making sure that no one ever experiences what you have experienced. And this is recognized by people who have experienced catastrophic loss. They know this, the truth of this. The loss has to be turned into a gift. And you're the one who can turn it into a gift to others by helping people be honest about what has happened to them, to talk about it. We all know that there are lots of cases now where people are speaking up about things that have happened to them publicly that they never did before. And this is a gift to every one of us for them to have this kind of honesty. The second part is, I think, goes back exactly to what you're talking about, which is the externalization of internal conflict, putting it on to other people. And this especially happens powerfully in marriages, in close relationships, family relationships, parents and children, co-workers, in close relationships where people oftentimes will do this. There are a second series of ways of handling this which have to do with how you process self-esteem issues. What is the basic message that you give, that you sort of send yourself about yourself? What words would you use to describe yourself? And if those are negative, where did those words come from? Where did they originate? Because when you were a baby, you didn't have those words. You got them from somewhere. And usually we get them from our families of origin. But what forgiveness means, I think, in the Christian sense, but also in this larger kind of secular sense, is, at its deepest level, is self-forgiveness, which just means give yourself a break here. I meditate every morning, about an hour every day. And one of the things that you have to do in order to meditate successfully is to stop criticizing yourself for the way that you're meditating. You know, stop that. You know, stop thinking about all these various things. Just focus, right? So what the way that this is described is, if you want to bring love and compassion and caring to other people, start with yourself. Bring love and compassion and caring to your own self. And at its deepest level, who you are is way, way deeper than that little negative message that we're sending ourselves. The truth about every human being is that you are somehow divine. And at the same time, we're mired in this set of experiences. But we were talking about this the other day. There has never, in the history of the planet, and all of the people who have lived on the planet, ever been anyone like you. Ever. You are completely unique. Totally. And now the question is, what are you going to do with that? Or as Mary Oliver, the poet in the United States, says, so what are you going to do with your one wild and precious life? And what you have to do is to be yourself. That's it. And that means forgiving yourself for all the things that you didn't do. And we've all got this little voice inside that says, oh, why didn't you do this and why didn't you do that? And it's useful to beat yourself up if you want to really fundamentally kind of change some habit or something of this sort. But basically, it prevents us from being able to shine that little light.
I have 2 words, which I wrote down again yesterday,
good.
And it was letting go.
Yeah.
Easy to say.
Are you reading Richard?
I might have been. Right, any other? Let me take one more if there is another one.
It's okay, it doesn't matter.
Catherine, do you have one?
Oh, it was quite trivial compared to that.
No. You're unique and your question will be...
No, it was just if you teach children when they're young these skills, do you find it gives them resilience as they grow older? And in that case, is this something we really should be pushing for in nursery schools and really
Yes.
very young levels, just
Yes.
to keep going with all this? That was really good. Yeah.
Yes, no, I think that's absolutely right. This, the 10 questions that I mentioned was developed for a nursery school. And the administrators, the teachers, the parents, and the kids all did the same thing. And so the kids are saying to their parents, Mommy, what happened? And having these great conversations. So, and this is just one little thing, but the important part is what they actually see. The greatest experiences, I think, are when kids become peer mediators with other kids. And I've done those trainings, and it's just breaks your heart. I mean, you just could die from joy at watching these conversations take place, because they're so deeply honest with each other, and they get it. They get the basic idea. And then their whole relationships are changed, and they realize they don't have to behave in these negative, destructive ways, and they don't have to slip into the kind of self-accusation and, internal conflict within themselves that's often created by this. So here's the real truth about conflict resolution and the reason why we're practicing it. We get to work on ourselves all the time. And you have to find it if there's something else that is preventing you from getting there. And that thing that prevents you is this sort of critical voice. What we don't understand is that the critical voice is actually the ego. But it's the flip side of the ego. But it's still, when you're beating yourself up, it's still all about you, right? So somebody, I think it's, who was it who said this? I've forgotten who said it, but it's humility is not thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of yourself less.
And I think we should wrap up now. There's so much to take away from this, so much to learn, but let's see if we can make a small difference. And although the world sometimes feels overwhelming, and both your questions about the political system are very, very apt, do remember that we are all in a situation where we can make a small difference somewhere, and these small differences can make all the difference. Little things can make a huge difference, and we may never know the effect of the small things that we do and the difference that they might make in the bigger picture. But it's our calling, I think, at least to do what we can within ourselves, within our families, within our communities, and within our church.